Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to the latest installment of our unique and groundbreaking Meet the Independent Candidate series. Welcome to episode 342. I'm your host, Paul Rykoff. The dog days of summer are here, and I'm coming to you from the waterfront in beautiful Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York, USA. And the temperature is rising here in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Ukraine, in Moscow, and all around the world. This is going to be a summer of heat. And now, in this summer of heat, is no time to get distracted. It's no time to lose focus. It is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. I am back in the city. Behind me is the beautiful Hudson River, the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center, and a city that is in the midst of the most important and consequential general mayoral election in modern history. That's just one of the hot spots happening in America this week. There's also continuing debate around Trump's new budget bill, which is radical and extreme. There's also attacks on our VA facilities that have been scaled back a bit, but are still significant. There's an ongoing debate about whether or not we will finally have a Russia sanctions bill. And of course, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary Chaos, continues to be dysfunctional, incompetent, and sloppy. And coming up, I've got an amazing conversation with another independent veteran that has just declared that he is running for the United States Senate. His name is Todd Achilles. He is a former Army officer. He is running in the great state of Idaho, and he left the Democratic Party. He has declared his independence, and you're going to hear from him exclusively on Independent Americans as our independent wave continues to grow this summer all across America. And my thanks especially to everyone who's watching on YouTube. If you're not following us and watching on YouTube, please go ahead and do that. Of course, hit the follow and subscribe button now and go to independentamericans.us and join our Patreon community. But before we get to my conversation with Todd Achilles, here they are, my top topics. Yeah, it's hot here this summer in America, and it's hot in D.C., and it's hot in New York, and it's hot in L.A., but nowhere is it hotter than inside Ukraine, where our brave Ukrainian allies continue to fight the evil forces of Putin and his tyrannical invasion of Ukraine. And there is some good news this summer, some overdue news. As you heard in the last episode with Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, there is new momentum from Republicans especially to finally increase the pressure on Russia to end their invasion and to better support Ukraine. As you've heard from Republican Don Bacon, you've heard from Republican Mike Lawler, you've heard from Democrat Seth Moulton and others, there is increased bipartisanship to finally drop more hammers on Russia and better support Ukraine. And that starts with a new sanctions bill that should be dropping any day now, a bipartisan sanctions bill from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Democrat Blumenthal of Connecticut. The two of them are finally going to drop this bill. There is increased pressure, and there might even be pressure from Trump. There was leaked audio from CNN this week of Trump speaking at a fundraiser where Trump said that he told Putin if he didn't let up on Ukraine, he was going to bomb Moscow.
To Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, we're going to bomb out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants the public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way. And I said, way.
Now, I don't think Trump is taking him seriously, but we should all take seriously the fact that Trump is changing his tone. He is being more aggressive on Putin. And no matter how he gets there or why he gets there, the important point is there is increased support coming from America to support Ukraine. Because in the midst of all the other chaos and heat happening in America, there is no fight that is happening in our world that is more important than the fight for freedom happening in Ukraine. Stay tuned here for more information, and of course, check out more at American Veterans for Ukraine. You can join the fight. You can help us turn up the heat on Putin and Russia, and you can stand with Ukraine in this important summer and until victory. Also, very important happening this week as democracy is attacked abroad and at home, the Supreme Court has now ruled that Trump can go ahead with mass firings of federal workers. This is critical as he now has a green light to continue his purge of civil servants all across the government. This will impact thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of noble, honorable civil servants, people who want to serve their country. But the firings are coming. And that will include thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of veterans. Because as I continue to remind you, 1 out of every 3 federal workers is a veteran. Patriotic veterans are being fired with no off-ramp, with no transition plan. We spent decades working to hire veterans and improve transitional programs. And they're not getting any jobs at Tesla. They're not getting any jobs at SpaceX. All they're getting is pink slips. So watch this space and stay vigilant. So the mass firings now have a green light. DOGE is cleared hot, and many more Americans will be facing the unemployment line. And there's one component of this that's not getting enough attention, something that you need to watch for, that this summer is below the radar. Earlier this year, it was reported, as a part of Elon Musk and DOGE's nationwide purge of federal employees, that radical VA Secretary Doug Collins would be firing tens of thousands of workers at the Department of Veterans Affairs. As many as 60 or 70,000 workers at VA were reportedly going to be fired. It's created a culture of fear across the VA. It's been incredibly destabilizing to lots of my friends who work hard to serve veterans, and it's destroyed morale and recruiting, as hundreds of thousands of VA employees don't know if they're going to have a job next week or not. And this week, we learned that the VA is actually only going to cut 30,000 members of the workforce at the Department of Veterans Affairs. They've already removed about 17,000 so far, but the goal now by the fall will be 30,000 people. That's 30,000 people who serve veterans, 30,000 people who will leave the noble pursuit of serving veterans. And as many as a third or half of them are veterans themselves. And don't buy the spin from the VA or Collins or Trump that this is going to improve efficiency. Because firing thousands of veterans who serve veterans without a transition plan is the opposite of efficiency. The radical, highly political, and dangerous moves continue to happen inside the Department of Veterans Affairs, way below the radar. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is the radical, extremist, culture war propagandist executing Trump's plan that everyone knows about. Doug Collins is the one that most people don't. So raise your voice with your member of Congress. Speak out publicly and tell them, hell no, we do not want thousands of veterans shoved into the unemployment line. Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or especially an independent, let your member of Congress know. Post on your social media. Tell your friends, hell no. Firing thousands of veterans is not efficient. It's stupid, it's dangerous, it's bad for veterans, it's bad for VA, and it's bad for America. Yes, our independent movement continues to grow. And this summer will be a critical tipping point in the development of that movement. More and more people are declaring their independence. They are leaving the two parties, and more independent veterans are declaring their independence and declaring their candidacy for public office. I just told you about Dan Osborne in Nebraska, who's been on this show before. And a few weeks ago, you met Brian Banks, another independent veteran who's running for U.S. Senate in South Dakota. And in this episode, you're about to meet another one. Just a few days before July 4th, just a few days before Independence Day, a new leader emerged to declare his independence and his candidacy. That leader is Army veteran Todd Achilles.
There have been times in the life of every nation when people must stand, not in despair, but in determination. I believe that time is now. I believe that place is Idaho. It's time to reclaim our republic. That's why I'm leaving the Democratic Party and announcing my independent campaign for U.S. Senate. I'm Todd Achilles. I was raised on a family farm. I served as an Army tank commander. I spent my career in the tech industry and served as an Idaho state representative. Now I'm a teacher and a veterans advocate. I love this country and I love Idaho, but we are failing. The two-party system is failing. No matter who's in power, the result's the same. Record debt, endless wars, policies that help corporations, not families.
Todd Achilles is courageously stepping up to run against incumbent partisan GOP Senator Jim Risch. Risch is one of the oldest members of the U.S. Senate. He's also one of the richest. And Todd Achilles is stepping up to challenge him and a Democrat. Todd Achilles is exactly the kind of strong, independent leader that Idaho needs to counter the extremism of the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, with Todd's candidacy, that means there are now 3 independent veterans running for U.S. Senate. They are the inspiring tip of the spear, and there are likely more to come. Yeah, this summer, there's a lot of dark shit happening out there, but there is light to contrast the heat, and that light is in the form of independent veterans like Todd Achilles. So welcome to a summer of heat, but also a summer of light. Welcome to the next step in the evolution of our powerful independent movement. Welcome to a conversation with another leader who is stepping up to leave the herds and run with the pack. Welcome to the dog days of summer. Welcome to the light to contrast the heat. Welcome to Independent Americans, episode 342. Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the globe, I hope you had an exceptional Independence Day, or Independence Day, as we like to say around here. It is going to be a summer of independence, and we are continuing our really important, groundbreaking Meet the Independents series. Joining me now from the great state of Idaho, the great and powerful Todd Achilles is here on Independent Americans. Welcome, sir.
How's it going, Paul? Good to be here.
Good to have you, man. We've been in touch over the last couple of weeks. You have now formally announced you are running for the Senate as an independent. I want to dig into that. I want people to know more about you. Thanks for joining us. But first, let me start with a question. Where are you, Todd, and how are you? How was your 4th?
4th was great. I'm at home here in Boise, Idaho, and yeah, I'm doing good, man. The response to announcing for this race has just been phenomenal. So I spent all yesterday calling folks that signed up to volunteer, dude, and it just reaffirms your faith in America. Some good people.
Well, I think you're going to reaffirm people's faith in America too, because we've been waiting for candidates like you. I'm going to dig into that, but maybe just start with for folks who are just getting to know you, finding out about you for the first time, Todd. You know, tell them who you are. Tell us about your background and why you're running for office at all. Why do you want to do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a family farm in Oregon. I served a couple of years on active duty as a tank commander and a platoon leader. And then I got into the tech sector when I got out, and just, I had a great career, 20 plus years, T-Mobile, Hewlett Packard, a couple startups. But then I had this itch. I wanted to get back into public service. I was tired of doing the private sector thing. I felt like I had more to contribute. So left my job at Hewlett Packard and, slowly sort of moved my way back into politics and working in policy. A seat came open in my neighborhood in Boise, and I raised my hand. And so I served 2 sessions in the Idaho legislature as a Democrat. And my district is only 25% Democrat, and I won with 60% of the vote. And it's kind of who I am. I'm really not interested in the party politics or any of that. I mean, we got serious stuff to get done, and all good policy is bipartisan, right? And I'm running for a bunch of reasons, Paul. I mean, the guy that's in there, he's been in politics almost as long as I've been alive. He's one of the oldest and one of the richest in a state. We're younger than the national average, and we make less money than the national average. And we can't have people representing the state who had all the benefits of, low income, affordable housing, all that stuff in the 60s and 70s, and they basically just pulled up the ladder behind it. So if you're a millennial or Gen Z in Idaho, and you're struggling, it's just the economy is fundamentally unfair. The system's fundamentally unfair, and we need folks who will get to Washington and work on changing that.
So let's talk about the independent piece, because I think you also represent another wave, right? Folks who are leaving the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they're declaring their independence. We had Don Bacon on a couple of months ago. Now, he may run for president as an independent. We've had Brian Bangs was on recently running for Senate in South Dakota, has left the Democratic Party. We had Mike Lawler on last week. I asked him why he hasn't left the Republican Party. But I think there is a new wave coming. And I think we're going to see it in this next year of people who leave the party for a number of reasons and declare their independence. So let me ask you, why did you declare your independence? Why did you leave the Democratic Party? And how do you define independent in this new landscape?
Yeah, good questions. Well, you know the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. I thought it was running for political office in 2025. There's some of that, but listen, I mean, the two-party system in DC is just fundamentally broken, and we're failing as a nation, right? I mean, it's serious. We can't get our shit together. The Army is smaller now than it's been since way before I served. The Navy's struggling. China is kicking our ass, both militarily and economically. And we can't get out of our own way and do these big, hard policy problems or solve these big, hard policy problems that we need to. So it's just, we need to do something different. And again, I go back to one of the lessons I learned in the Army is, lead by example, man. If there's going to be a better way for this country, then we're going to become an independent. We're going to leave the broken two-party system behind, and I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to give a path for Idahoans to get behind.
There's no secret now that the Republican Party favorability rating is dropping. More folks are declaring their independence. Veterans, over 50% are independent. The Democratic Party brand is in the toilet and seems to be dropping fast. That's got to be true in Idaho. Can you talk about how you're going to overcome the fact that you used to be a Democrat? There will be a Republican in this race. There's also a Democrat that's declared, so you will be able to differentiate yourself. But we saw with Dan Osborne, when there wasn't a Democrat, they called him Democrat Dan, which killed him in Nebraska. In Idaho, I got to imagine people are going to be much more open to you as an independent, but you do represent this new generation. So how can they trust you to be independent and know that you're not secretly a Democrat?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing I heard when I was knocking on doors in the last campaign is, man, Todd, you're a better Republican than that other person on the ballot. And my closest partners in the legislature were Republicans. And again, because all good policy is bipartisan. And and we've got a great, strong group of Democrats in the Idaho legislature. And we're all trying to move the state forward in the right way, but the partisanship is brutal. I mean, listen, my Republican friends, I couldn't go up to their desk and have a conversation with them on the floor because somebody would film it and then that would be used against them. So I had to always talk with them outside of the chamber, which is just ridiculous. And then, some of the worst things that folks have said about me when I was in session came from the far left. The job in front of us is in the middle, right? And the parties just retreat, particularly in Idaho. The parties are just retreating farther and farther into the corners, and the majority of Idahoans are kind of left in the middle.
Can you talk about that a bit more? Because there's the national context and there's obviously the local context, right? Like folks from Idaho, have a spirit of independence that I think is unique, right? But you've also got the national environment where Trump keeps going to the right and driving the Republican Party further right. And now you've got, the rise of Mamdani here in New York. You've got AOC, you've got Bernie Sanders. Can you talk about how you think Idahoans are reacting to that? And do you see other folks from the state legislature or across Idaho or maybe across the country that you think are close to a breaking point and might feel like they can finally do it now because they see you do it?
Yeah, well, listen, there's four different versions of the Republican Party in the state of Idaho. There's two different freedom caucuses. There's kind of this old school libertarian, and then there's this more moderate, which I think is a tradition in Idaho, which is invest in schools, invest in roads, invest in infrastructure. Let's be smart about what we're doing, but fiscally responsible. And then you've got the Dems, and so there is no Republican, right? Depending on who you are and who you talk to, and I think that's the reality. And Idaho is you're right. We are fiercely independent. Back before we closed the primaries in 2011, so in 2012, 70% of Idahoans were unaffiliated with the party. 70%. That was the highest in the nation. And because of closed primaries, we forced people to pick parties and force them into those corners. But that value set, that ethos of being independent, it's still there. And I'm seeing that just with people responding to my campaign.
So you do support open primaries, something that's going to be critical here. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you support it?
Yeah, we actually started up a veterans organization, Veterans for Idaho Voters. Idaho's got 160,000 vets. It's the sixth highest in the U.S. on a per capita basis. And we just, again, because vets are by and large nonpartisan. So we built this big veterans organization. It's one of the largest in the state in support of open primaries. Broad support for open primaries. Independents should be able to participate. They shouldn't have to pay for an election they can't participate in. And then, we just didn't communicate well on ranked choice voting, which at the end of the day is the fastest, cheapest way to go from 4 candidates to one with 50%. But we got our butt handed to us. We only got 30% of the vote. So a lot of lessons learned from that. But as one of my Republican friends told me, he's like, Todd, the cause is just. We got to keep working on open primaries.
So what's next in that fight in Idaho? Is it a ballot initiative? Is it something you think you can get as a part of your? You're obviously going to talk about it a lot in the campaign. Your election is next fall, and there's a partisan primary next summer, right, for the Republicans and the Democrats. Yeah. What do you think the path is forward for open primaries in your state?
Well, I don't think anything's going to happen in the next cycle. I did do a little. I don't think it was underhanded, but I inserted repeal of our closed primaries into a bill that came in front of me in the legislature. Actually, it was the Speaker of the House's bill, and he gave me some kudos for that move. The motion got shot down, but we're gonna keep this thing alive. I think it's going to be 27 beyond when we come back to it.
Yeah, I think we got to keep pushing the issue, right? We've talked about how New York City is going to be a very high-profile media market. We've got the New York City mayor's race here. We had Jim Walden on, who this week testified in support of open primaries. And I think that the momentum is growing there, but so is the understanding that veterans can cross the partisan lines. Let me ask you about a couple issues. I think your campaign ad was very strong. You talked about why you're running, about what's important in Idaho. Can you talk about federal lands? Because that's an issue right now that's central to you, central to Idaho. I don't think is getting enough attention on the coast, but talk about the attacks that are happening on federal lands and your position on that.
Yeah. A lot of people back east don't get this, but public lands are our soul. That's why you live here. 2/3 of Idaho's lands are public, and we grew up on it. All my best memories of a kid was being out on public lands. We raised our kid, my daughters, we learned to go camping out on public lands, and, whether it's snow camping or backcountry skiing or whatever it may be, all of that's on public lands. That's who we are. And Senator Mike Lee from Utah just had this ridiculous bill to try and sell off public lands across the West. And our two senators, they had an opportunity to stop this stuff early. They didn't do it. I think because it was a Democratic initiative, even though Montana's two Republicans got on board with it. And then we let this thing go. And what you saw is everyone in the state coming together, right? Hunters, hikers, tree huggers, doesn't matter, man. We were all out there together to protect our public lands, and that not 1 acre. This is a bright red line for any Idaho politicians serving in Congress, right? Don't even think about selling public lands. The only conversation we need to have is how we take better care of them.
Ken Burns has been on this show before and has done some great work on the importance and the American genius and leadership on public lands, right? That where we set aside these public lands for future generations. And I don't think there's a better example of selling our future and kind of selling our country's soul than the idea that we can sell public lands off for a quick buck. It's really short-sighted. I think it's going to be an important issue for you, especially to run on and bring people together on. But let me ask you to talk about the landscape. Talk about who you're running against, right? You got a entrenched Republican, Jim Risch, who's been there since, I think, 2009. There's also a Democrat who's declared, which I think is important for you to be able to differentiate yourself. But talk about your opponents that are in the race so far and how you think you can beat them without the party machine, without the big money. You're not a billionaire, I don't think. How are you going to be able to compete against the two-party duopoly and the monsters that dominate our political landscape?
Well, the guy we're running against, the incumbent Jim Risch, has been in Idaho politics since I think he won his first election in 1970. So the guy who's been around the state forever. He's the fourth oldest and the seventh richest in the Senate, which is saying something, man. And I think he's lost touch with the challenges in Idaho. And they are, I mean, it's economic, it's affordability. We continue to be a low wage state, but housing, healthcare, all of these other things are actually in the upper half in terms of the cost. And so Idahoans, we can't afford to live in this state. I mean, it's just fundamentally wrong. And that's not a function of, the free market or anything else. It's consistent policy over the last 2 decades that have favored consolidation and undermined competition and gave, the benefit to the billionaires at the expense of the workers. And we just need to wind that shit back, right? It's got to be fixed. And then, in terms of other folks in the race, there is a Democrat in the race. There's another independent. I mean, listen, we're going to hustle. I've cleared the decks for the next 18 months. This is what I'm doing. We're going to get out to every part of the state, every small town, and we're just going to have conversations. And I'm going to present myself, and I'm going to listen to feedback. Idahoans want something new, though, and we hear it again and again, and it's going to be a lot of work. Listen, man, it's hard to run as an independent. Let's just be clear. We got to build our own party infrastructure, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
See, you are the reason why we built Independent Veterans of America. And, we're going to, of course, invite you to apply for endorsement. And I anticipate that you'll get it. We had Brian Bangs on this show a couple of weeks ago. Just this morning, as we went to record, Dan Osborne formally announced that he's going to be running again for the Senate against Pete Ricketts, who is a billionaire who owns the Chicago Cubs. I mean, this is going to be a hell of a contrast. But can you talk about, I don't know if any of the other candidates in your race are veterans, but can you talk about whether that's the case? Will you be able to differentiate on that? Because Risch hasn't served in the military, unless I'm mistaken, and how that gives you a unique credibility and a unique level of respect, especially when national security, the deployment of the National Guard, Ukraine, all these issues are so front and center. And you've been a tank commander, you've been in harm's way, and you've led people, in danger. Talk about that if you can, please.
Yeah, well, let me start with Dan and Brian, because both good dudes. I've gotten a chance to meet them over the last couple of weeks since I announced. Different guys, different perspectives. They served in different ways, but I mean, at its root, all three of us have the same value set in terms of what we're trying to do for the country. There is one other vet in the race. He is a Republican, so he's going to be challenging the incumbent in the May 26 primary. I don't know him. He's ran for some stuff in the past, but he's got a pretty good tenure in the Army, and I got a ton of respect for that. But yeah, when you come to the national security issues, so I served a couple of years on active duty. I served a couple of years in the National Guard, and listen, man, I remember like it was yesterday when my platoon deployed to Kuwait in the mid-90s when Saddam threatened to invade Kuwait again. And I could still see us formed up. I could still see all the families outside the formation. I can still see Sergeant Washington's kids in their football uniforms. This is October of '94. I mean, dude, it's like this morning, right? And I got much luckier than you, Paul. When I got there, nobody shot back at us. So I got really lucky in the mid '90s as opposed to all the hard work that you all did. So there's no equivalency here. But when you've been in charge, as you know as well as anybody, I mean, that's a duty, right? And everything you do from a national standpoint in terms of, what we allow the president to do and what we should be held by Congress. Um, you know, you have a completely different perspective on what we're getting into and the impact of that down at the squad level, right?
Yep. I think that's. Can I ask you a question I've asked all the independent candidates? Who will you caucus with? And folks are going to want to know, who you're going to vote for. It's an off-cycle election, so there's not Harris and Trump on the ticket here. But if you get sent to Congress, you're to the Senate, you're going to be in a critical position. If Dan Osborne had been there instead of Deb Fischer, he might have been the vote that stopped Pete Hegseth, right? I mean, one vote difference on a lot of these. But ultimately, you have to make a choice on whether you're going to caucus with somebody, nobody, or something else. So what's your answer when they ask you who you're going to caucus with?
Yeah, listen, I'm going to caucus with who's ever best for Idaho. So if that means caucusing on my own and being that fulcrum vote, then fine, I'll do that. If that means caucusing with Republicans and poking them from the left, I'll do that, or poking the Democrats from the right. Whatever is best for Idaho is what I'm going to be doing.
All right, right on. I know you're going to come back and join us again. You're going to stick around for a couple extra questions for our Patreon members. Thank you to the vigilant, the very vigilant, the most vigilant, the folks who contribute to make this content possible and help make our Meet the Independent Candidate series possible. I mean, it'd be really fun and powerful and game-changing if you and Brian and Dan were all there in the Senate, creating an independent caucus and being that fulcrum. And now I think it's more possible than ever before. You were maybe the second most popular Idahoan in my house, behind, as I've told you, Ashton Genty, the amazing running back from Boise State, is now going to the Raiders, and my kids love him, and I love him. You think you can get his?
I mean, he's pretty busy, but he's just amazing, isn't he? And his story, growing up in Europe, God, the guy's just amazing, and he's been phenomenal. He was phenomenal for Boise State. What an athlete!
Yep. I mean, if you can bottle a little bit of that Boise State branding and energy that really put Idaho on the map nationally in sports with the Smurf turf, I don't know if you can come up with your version of the Smurf turf for the campaign. But let me ask you a final question I ask everybody. Todd, a lot of folks who are just getting to know you for the first time, whether they're from Idaho or they're part of this independent movement nationally, I'm going to give you the floor for 30 seconds or a minute. Why should they support you? Why should they vote for you if they're in Idaho? And if they're not in Idaho, why should they support you and this campaign that you've got up against some pretty high stakes?
Well, listen, when something's not working, you can't be afraid to change course, right? And I think every American voter's got to be willing to change course because the system is fundamentally broken. And I'm a little bit older than you, Paul, but it's never been this bad. And we're putting the nation at risk, and we're putting our kids' futures at risk. So if you just take the three of us, Dan, Brian, and me, we're all vets. We've all got different career experiences. I mean, listen, mine's corporate America. Brian was an attorney. Dan's a super solid union guy. When I look at economic inequality, I see that corporations undermining competition and basically rigging the economy in their favor at the expense of workers. We have got to change the relationship between big business and Americans, because they've got business has a duty to their communities, they've got a duty to their employees, and they've got a duty to the country. And right now, the only thing they give a shit about is Wall Street. And we've got to break that cycle because it's undermining it. And that's my perspective. That's what I bring to it. But you get a couple of us in Congress as independents. I think we can do a lot to get this country back on track.
I agree. I'm excited by your candidacy. You and I have been talking for, a couple of years now, I think, and I've been rooting for you to make this move. I really applaud you and your family for taking the plunge. I think you're going to inspire a lot of other folks to run as independents, to run as veteran independents, and to leave the party. I say it all the time, leave the herds, run with the pack, declare your independence. So I can think of no better guest to have on, right after Independence Day than someone who's done it. You've left the party, you've taken the plunge, and I think you're helping break a seal that's like a dam ready to crumble. So thanks for joining us. Wishing you the best. You got my support. IVA is going to be proud to support you in the future. And to everybody listening and watching, Todd Achilles is the man. He's taking on the fight, and he needs your support. Thanks for all you're doing, sir, and good luck out there. Stay vigilant.
All right, Paul. Thanks for all your work.
Yeah, this summer is proving to be a hot one, but helpers are stepping up to lead. Helpers are stepping up to go in when others are running out. You see that with Todd Achilles. You see that with so many of the important, inspiring, and iconic guests we've had on this show over the last 5 years. And you see it this week, especially in Texas, where our entire country and the world mourns the devastating loss of life after the floods that happened last week. Dozens have died, including dozens of children. Dozens are still missing. But hundreds and thousands have been saved because of the helpers that stepped up to help. I don't know if there's ever been a better example of a helper than Coast Guard rescue swimmer Scott Ruskin, who rescued hundreds of kids this week in Texas. Check this out.
I got on scene, boots on the ground at Camp Mystic. Kind of discovered I was the only person there as far as like first responders go. So yeah, I had about 200 kids mostly, all scared, terrified, cold, having probably the worst day of their life, and I just kind of need to triage them, get them to a higher level of care, and get them off the flood zone with a lot of the US 60 Army helicopters.
Yeah, the helpers are out there this summer and every day, all across America and all around the world. And if there's a helper you want to highlight, hit me up on social media. We're on every single platform, or use the hashtag #LookForTheHelpers. Or go to independentamericans.us, where you can also watch the full video of this episode. You can see all our archives of the other important, inspiring guests we've had over the last 5 years. And you can go deeper on our Meet the Independent Candidate series, including our conversations with Dan Osborne, Brian Bangs, Yemi Mobilade, Mayor Tim Kelly, Jim Walden, and others. And you can join our Patreon community, where you can help me keep bringing this independent content. You can get exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, extra content, discounts, and a heads up on every guest before anyone else knows. That's all at independentamericans.us. Yeah, it's shaping up to be a hot summer here all across America. Right now in Brooklyn, it's almost 100 degrees. But in the midst of all that fire and heat and chaos, we've got to make time to enjoy summer, to reflect on what's most important, to appreciate what we've got, and spend time with those we love. And as we passed another July 4th and Independence Day, I've got one quick Reichoff's recommendation to help you through this summer. Last week, for Independence Day, of course, I sent you a new episode. Go check out Mike Lawler if you haven't already. But I also had some time to reflect, enjoy, and celebrate America with my family. And we did something especially uniquely American that I recommend you do this summer. All across America, there are fairs. County fairs, state fairs, local fairs. And last week, I went with my older son to a local volunteer fire department July 4th fair, where we played games, we went on rides, we ate junk food, and we celebrated each other, we celebrated life, and we celebrated America. My 9-year-old kind of hit the local fair lottery. We timed it just right, in a way I never have before in my life, and we made it to the Ferris wheel just as the fireworks were starting. We ended up on the Ferris wheel for the entire amazing fireworks display out in Long Island, and supported a local volunteer fire department. Men and women who are helpers every single day and represent the best of what this country is all about. So this summer, find a local fair near you. Go on a ride, eat a zeppoli, or a fried dough, or an elephant ear, or a funnel cake, or whatever they call it in your area. Try to win a prize, give back to your local community, and enjoy a little slice of a local fair that is so uniquely American. It's one of the best parts of summer, and it's one of the best parts of America. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of our Meet the Independent Candidate series with Todd Achilles. If you did, please sure to hit subscribe right now. If you're not already, follow and watch us on YouTube, and share this episode with others. Invite them to declare their independence. Because especially in the heat of summer, vigilance is the price of freedom. But we're not alone in our vigilance. We're all vigilant, and we're all in this together. Country over party, people over politics, light to contrast the heat, and growing a new movement that continues to grow by the day this summer, this year, and this decade. The Democrats won't save us. The Republicans won't either. It's independence that can add the light to contrast the heat and provide the leadership that this country is looking for, and that means you. Thanks for listening, and thank you for watching. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Down with Hamas. Down with Putin. Slava Ukraine. And stay vigilant, America. Stay vigilant, and happy summer.
Powered by Righteous Media.